Through this video today, we are going to be exploring how Robert Frost uses imagery and other literary devices to portray the themes of depression and isolation in his poem, Acquainted with the Night. Before we begin, I will read through the poem once, and then I will read the stanzas line by line later on in this video. I've been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I've looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I've stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. The rhyme scheme utilized in this poem is an ABA, BCB, CDC, DAD, AA pattern, which serves to intertwine all the stanzas together before leaving the last two lines as a bit of a standalone couplet compared to the first four stanzas. Acquainted with the Night is also an iambic pentameter, which consists of 5 stressed per line, creating a constant rhythmical pattern much like walking. Before we jump into the imagery of each stanza and how it builds into the theme of depression and isolation presented, there are 2 other literary devices to discuss: anaphora and irony. Anaphora is seen in the use of the words I have. The repeated use emphasizes the reality and finality of the speaker's situation and its ongoing impact on his life. Even just the repetition of the word I emphasizes how alone he feels. Irony is used in the very title and throughout the poem through the word acquainted. Acquaintance should suggest a slight relationship, when in all realness readers can see the intimacy and knowledge the speaker has of the darkness he describes. Now we will move stanza by stanza and build the imagery up in order to build the theme as Robert Frost did. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. The first stanza lets us know that the speaker has gone through much and is still walking through life in the state of darkness, and that there is now some sort of choice that has to be made in order to return to light. As in his poem he states, I have outwalked the furthest city light, but you can always walk back, so the choice must be made by the speaker to walk back. Stanza 2. I have looked down the saddest city lane, I have passed by the watchman on his beat, and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. The second stanza introduces the only other person we meet, even if it's just briefly in the poem. The turning away could be guilt, shyness, lack of self-esteem, but whatever it is buried deep, and even though it needs to come out, we aren't confident as readers that it will ever manifest. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, for not to call me back or to say goodbye. In the third and fourth stanzas, a deeper loneliness is introduced along with the feelings of depression. When a cry is heard, the speaker thinks about it, even though he knows it's not for him. When the speaker comments, but not to call me back or say goodbye, to me that was a very powerful line because I can imagine the loop of depression that is triggered by these words. These thoughts can become loops triggered by outside actions, such as cries, and they cause an increased level of depression and feelings of heightened isolation and self-depreciation. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. Seeing out the fourth stanza, we see the moon introduced as a timeless clock, hanging out of reach in the sky. It is a source of light, but it is distant and unreachable as well. It only hints at light. The speaker can tell himself the night can be his home, but in reality, until he gets back to the real light of day, is an unrealistic substitute. By only going out in the night, he is not giving himself the chance to ever go back to the day and creates a cycle of depression for himself. To close, the speaker is left where he originally was, resigned to face the night alone. In this poem, consisting of 7 sentences, and utilizing a very conversational tone, the poet examines his relationship with both himself and society. Through use of imagery and the other devices previously mentioned in this video, as well as some other devices, namely characterization of the night, as well as some symbolism, is able to dive deeply and explain the relationship that the speaker has with the night, and as well as the themes of depression and isolation overall. The poem ends as begins. With the poet's statement, he is one acquainted with the night. The poet seems content to continue the journey, perhaps sensing that it is a journey that will continue throughout his life. This is because Frost characterizes the night as his own inner life and something he does not fully know, that he is only acquainted with, hence the title.